Good morning, South Rock. Welcome to the weekly devotion for the story. Now, today is chapter 2, and man, there's a lot to unpack. There's a lot to look at because it talks about the story of Abraham, it talks about the story of Isaac, and then Jacob. And so I really didn't know what to narrow in on because we could have talked about the covenant with Abraham, how God says, I'm going to bring a nation, I'm going to save the world out of your people, as he's talking to Abraham. We could have talked about what that covenant looks like. We could have talked about Ishmael. We could have talked about the the going through with the sacrifice of Isaac, but God stopping him. We could have talked about a lot of things. That's what I'm trying to get at. But the thing I really want to bring up that I have not talked at length on ever is the idea of the name Israel. So Israel means wrestles with God, because the story at the end of chapter 2, or towards the end of chapter 2, is Jacob wrestling with a mysterious man and finally kind of pinning him down and saying, bless me. And the man says, I'm going to bless you by saying that your name is now Israel, because you have struggled with God and man and have succeeded, basically. And he is blessed through this, Jacob is, and he becomes Israel, which is, of course, what we know to be the nation now of Israel. And so it means struggles with God, effectively, or wrestles with God. And it's so telling for their future. It's so telling for how the rest of the Old Testament, really, that they will struggle with God. They will wrestle with this. They'll wrestle with idolatry. They'll wrestle with, just different things going on in the nation. Should we follow God? Should we follow a king? How does this look? How does this work? What parts of the law and where's the law? And even up until Jesus' time, they wrestle and they struggle with God. But after Jesus came, we're Israel now. Yeah, but Paul mentions this a lot in his writings, that we are Israel now. Through faith, we have become children of Abraham and therefore children of the promise. So we get to be called Israel. We are grafted into Israel. So we are now the ones who wrestle and struggle with God. And so we often, I think, look at the Old Testament and think, oh, those silly Israelites couldn't get it right, couldn't figure out how to live with God. And really, we're the same. We do the same thing, right? We wrestle with God. There's days where we are sinners. There's days where we separate ourselves. There's days where we choose really not to follow Jesus or follow God. We choose idolatry or any other number of sins. And so that's really what I want you to ponder on today. How have you embodied the name Israel? How have you wrestled with God? And what are ways that you can maybe submit yourself to God? Maybe you can be the one to be pinned down here instead of trying to pin God down. So how are you wrestling with God, and how can you submit further to his will and to his kingdom? So that's all I have. I hope you have a good rest of your day.